Dora Fox dropped to her knees in front of my desk, clutching the hem of my pants like her life depended on it. Professor, if I start showing, the school will expel me. I come from nothing. School is my only way out. Please lend me $3,000 for an abortion. In my last life, I had softened. I transferred her the money on the spot, and even pulled strings at a hospital to keep the procedure quiet. I thought I was saving a student. She repaid me with a screenshot of my transfer and a 66-page slideshow, accusing me of coercing her into sleeping with me and getting her pregnant. Overnight, I became a monster in a suit, a disgrace to the profession. The internet tore me apart. My daughter was dragged into an alley by a mob of righteous strangers and violated until she died. My wife broke and jumped to her death. And Dora, wrapped in her perfect victim story, got her graduate recommendation and became a millionaire influencer. The day the police took me away, he looked at the wreck of me and smiled. Professor, she had said, this world was never built to reward good hearts. Was it? When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the beginning. Back to the day she knelt in my office begging for $3,000. This time, I picked up the phone. I'm reporting a currently enrolled student for pregnancy, in violation of school policy and related misconduct. I said, I recommend immediate expulsion. Dora went stiff. She clearly hadn't expected the soft-hearted fool from last life to turn her in without hesitation. The next second, she lunged at me, clawing for my phone. Right then, Dean Whitaker's voice came through the line. Professor Joyce, is your report that student Dora Fox is pregnant accurate? I have audio and video of the entire exchange. His tone sharpened at once. Good. I'll verify immediately and handle the expulsion according to policy. The call ended. Dora snapped, eyes red. Mr. Joyce, all I did was ask to borrow $3,000. If you didn't want to help, fine. But why report me? Do you know I have 3 younger brothers at home? If I get expelled, my parents will sell me to some old man for bride money. School is my only chance. I was young. I got tricked. You could have helped me. Why are you doing this to me? Her screaming carried through the office door. Colleagues from nearby classrooms pushed it open. Professor Joyce, if her family situation is that bad, isn't this a little heartless? Right? It's only $3,000. It's not like you can't afford it. Seeing support gather around her, Dora cried harder. That same pitiful act had fooled me before. One soft moment, and I had paid for her abortion, covered for her, destroyed my own life. I looked at my colleagues with a flat expression. Fine. If you don't want to be heartless, then you too can pay for her abortion and help hide her violation of school rules. They froze. One gave an awkward laugh. She asked you, not me. Why should I help her? Exactly. I said, why should I? I turned back to Dora. Being young isn't an excuse for breaking the rules. Broke school policy. Why should I clean up your mess? I'm a teacher, not your nanny. Your mistakes are yours. Then I walked out without looking back. By the time I got home, my wife was setting the last dish on the table. Why are you so late? My daughter looked up from her homework. Dad, can you help me with a math problem? Later, that ordinary warmth hit me so hard. My chest ached. In my last life, playing the saint had cost me everything. This time, no one was touching my family. We had barely finished dinner when my phone rang. Dean Whitaker. His voice was low. Professor Joyce to Academic Affairs immediately. Dora Fox has filed a formal complaint against you. She claims you used your position to coerce her into sleeping with you and got her pregnant. I shoved open the office door to find the dean's face black with anger. He grabbed a thick stack of printouts and threw them at my feet. Joseph Joyce, you're the youngest associate professor this school has. Department invested heavily in you, and this is what you do? Coerce a student? Where is your integrity? I picked up the pages and flipped through them, just like last time. Fake transfer records showing I'd supposedly sent Dora money, plus a chain of explicit messages. I set them down. Dean, how are you so sure this is me? Couldn't Dora Fox have fabricated it? He stared at me speechless for 2 seconds, then erupted. Do you hear yourself? She's a decent girl. Why would she ruin her own reputation to slander a professor? Dora raised tear-filled eyes to the room. I never wanted to make this public. Professor Joyce harassed me again and again. He said if I was with him, he could get me into graduate school. Her voice broke into sobs. All I wanted was money for the abortion so I could graduate quietly. But he turned around and reported my pregnancy just to ruin me. The room turned on me instantly. No wonder he reported her guilty conscience. He wanted to strike first before she exposed him. How can an animal like this stay at a university? The dean rubbed his forehead. $3,000. If you'd just given it to her, Would any of this be happening? Joseph Joyce resigned quietly. Say you're leaving over a private dispute. At least keep a little dignity. Dora covered her face and shook with sobs. So that's it? It all gets brushed away? I'm a girl with no one to rely on. Lost my reputation. I'm carrying his child. And I don't even get an apology? I nearly laughed. Last time, I had panicked and apologized in front of everyone. I took that video, spread it online, and turned me into a hypocrite the whole country spat on. While she became the poster girl for standing up to power. This time, I stepped toward her. Fine, I said. Since you insist, the child is mine. When did you get pregnant? And where? Her eyes trembled. Professor Joyce, do you really have to force me like this? That day, you used a conference as an excuse to take me out, lured me to a hotel, and I fought as hard as I could. Which hotel? The Ritz-Carlton. Room 4203. What time? 3 months ago? Professor Joyce, stop pushing me. I'll withdraw the complaint, okay? I'm begging you, let me go. She dropped to her knees and started banging her forehead against the floor, the perfect image of a helpless victim. The dean, furious, slapped me across the face. Joseph Joyce, what exactly do you want? This can all end with one apology. And you insist on making it bigger? I ignored the sting and kept my eyes on Dora. At 3 months, the hospital can do a paternity test. Since all the administrators are here as witnesses, let's go now. Draw blood in front of everyone and find out whose child she's carrying. The dean's face changed. Joseph, are you really not going to let this go? Do you know what this will do to the university's reputation? Of course, the school's name mattered more than the truth. I was supposed to be thrown to the wolves for the greater good. Instead, I clapped toward the door. Reporters rushed in and began live streaming. Facing the cameras, I said, clearly, there has never been anything improper between me, Joseph Joyce, and Dora Fox. The child she's carrying is mine. I'll go to prison willingly. Dora stared in shock, forgetting to cry as comments exploded across the live feed. Teachers with no morals are really this bold now. If he didn't touch her, why would she ask him for abortion money? Wait, if he's offering a paternity test in public, maybe she's lying. In minutes, the story shot to the top of trending. The dean started sweating and bowed toward the cameras. Please rest assured, the university will never tolerate misconduct. Then he turned and jabbed a finger at me. Have you lost your mind? You had to make this impossible to contain for everyone. Apologize publicly, right now. Apologize for what I said. I'm the one asking for a blood test in front of witnesses. Whoever doesn't dare go is the one with something to hide. Dora lifted her tear-streaked face to the cameras, looking wronged and brave. I'm not afraid. I'll fight campus predators to the end. What happened today can't be solved with one apology. I want justice. I smiled coldly. Of course, if I committed the crime, I go to prison. If you made a false accusation, you go to prison. The whole crowd poured toward the hospital. Blood was drawn quickly. While we waited for the results, my wife and daughter rushed in. My daughter's eyes were red. Dad, are you okay? What those people online are saying. It's all a lie, right? Seeing her like that felt like a knife turning in my chest. In my last life, she had died, still crying that her father was a good man. I bent and wiped her tears. Don't be scared. Dad's fine. The truth will come out. The people around us sneered. What a loving father. Too bad he didn't think of that. When preying on someone else's daughter, his own daughter is precious. Everyone else's is disposable. Disgusting. I covered my daughter's ears and ignored them. Half an hour later, a nurse came over with a report. I didn't take it. Please read it aloud so no one can say I tampered with it. I trust science. It will clear my name. The nurse nodded and opened the file. According to the medical paternity test, Joseph Joyce and the fetus carried by Dora Fox share a biological relationship. I froze. A hum filled my ears. How is that possible? The room exploded. How is it possible? The proof is right there. And he's still pretending. Two-faced bastard. He talked so tough about the DNA test. And now look at him. I snatched the report from the nurse. Black ink on white paper. Biological relationship exists. My mind went blank. I had never touched Dora Fox. How could she be carrying my child? Before I could speak, a slap cracked across my face. My wife stood there, eyes full of devastation. Joseph Joyce, how could you do something like this? You're lower than an animal. We're getting a divorce. Even my daughter looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Dad, did you really lie to us? I reached for her in panic, and she shrank back half a step. That tiny movement cut deeper than any blade. Was I really about to relive it all? At that moment, Dora threw herself in front of the cameras. Weak and noble and lethal. Professor Joyce, I know everyone respects you, but the science is right in front of us. You can't keep denying it. All I ever wanted was an apology. Never wanted to send you to prison. She paused. The perfect victim. Just give me $3,000 and I'll get rid of the baby right away. I'll let this go, and I won't press charges. The crowd erupted again. That girl is too kind. Scum like him belongs in prison. There's no saving a man like this. The dean glared at me. The evidence couldn't be clearer. What is there left to argue? The university is officially terminating your teaching position. Effective immediately. We'll report you to the Department of Education for blacklisting. And full accountability. No. I roared. This is wrong. It has to be wrong. I never touched her. That only pushed them over the edge. Several people rushed me and started kicking. Fists and shoes rained down. Curses came from every side. Through the chaos, I caught Dora glancing up at me once before dropping her head again, playing frightened and innocent. Professor Joyce, she said softly, in the end, this is still your fault. I had no choice either. Both my cheeks burned. Every bone in my body throbbed. I stared at her and screamed with everything I had left. You're lying. This is not my child. This is the filth from your own life. That lit the crowd up even more. More people surged forward. Someone pulled out a phone and called the police. 911, there's a beast here. Abusing a female student, had him arrested. Curled on the freezing floor, pain tearing through my whole body. I looked through blurred vision at Dora Fox's smug expression. And then, in that instant, everything clicked. I tore free from the hands dragging me down and shouted with all my strength, I have proof. My voice rang out, raw and echoing against the hard tiles of the hospital corridor. The boots that had been kicking my ribs hesitated. A heavy silence fell over the hallway as the onlookers, caught off guard by the sheer desperation and fierce conviction in my voice, slowly backed away. I hauled myself up against the wall, wiping a smear of blood from the corner of my mouth. Every breath hurt, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. Dora Fox stood near the nurse's station, her eyes flickering with a sudden, sharp anxiety. For a fraction of a second, her mask of tragic innocence slipped. He's just trying to buy time, Dean Whitaker shouted, adjusting his glasses. His face flushed with righteous indignation. The medical report is right there, black and white, certified by this very hospital. Joseph, stop embarrassing yourself and the university. Read the top header of that report, Dean Whitaker, I said, pointing a trembling, blood-stained finger at the paper in the nurse's hand. Read the name of the laboratory that processed it. The nurse looked down, flustered. It came from Lab 3, the emergency diagnostic unit on the 4th floor. And who heads Lab 3? I took a step forward, towering over the terrified nurse, though my chest was heaving. Dr. Richard Vance, Dora Fox's maternal uncle. Gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Dora's face drained of color completely. That's a lie. My uncle works in general pathology. He didn't process it? I interrupted, turning to the two police officers who had just squeezed through the back of the crowded hallway, responding to the emergency call. Officers, I am Professor Joseph Joyce. Before I came to this hospital today, I knew a trap was being set. I knew my reputation, my job, and my life were on the line. So, I didn't just submit blood to this hospital's internal lab. I pulled a stamped, sealed document from my inner coat pocket, the one item I had kept protected during the beating. 3 hours ago, immediately after reporting Dora Fox to Academic Affairs, I drove to the State Forensic Medical Center. I had my blood drawn under official legal supervision, witnessed by Attorney Thomas Vance of the District Legal Aid. I also had a complete medical examination done. I snapped the folder open and held the top page directly in front of the lead police officer's eyes. Page 2, I said coldly. A certified surgical record from St. Jude's Memorial Hospital, dated 5 years ago. Following the birth of my daughter, I underwent a complete, irreversible bilateral vasectomy. My sperm count is 0. Medical science dictates that it is physically, biologically impossible for me to impregnate anyone. The lead officer took the file, his eyes sweeping across the official state seals, signatures, and notary stamps. His expression hardened instantly. He looked up, glancing between the notarized sterility report, me, and then toward Dora Fox. This is certified by the State Forensic Bureau, the officer muttered, his voice carrying clearly down the hall. The crowd went dead silent. The internet live streamer, who had been shoving his phone in my face seconds earlier, froze, his mouth agape as his chat feed began, exploding with millions of wildly shifting comments. That's not all. I continued, taking another step toward Dora, who was trembling violently now. If that fetus carries my DNA, then the sample tested by Dr. Richard Vance wasn't fetal amniotic fluid at all. It was my own blood sample, split into 2 tubes and labeled as both father and child. Elementary trick in evidence tampering. You're lying. You fabricated those papers. Dora shrieked, her voice suddenly dropping its meek, fragile tone, replaced by hysterical panic. Officer, he's a professor. He has money. He forged those state documents. Forged a state forensic stamp? The lead officer pulled out his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I need a fraud and evidence tampering team sent to St. Jude's Hospital, 4th floor. Lab 3 immediately. Hold, Dr. Richard Vance in his office. No. Dora gasped, stumbling backward. Dean Whitaker's face went from angry red to a sickly, ghostly gray. He looked at Dora, then at me, realizing in a terrifying flash that the sinking ship he had tied himself to was about to drag the entire university administration down into the deep end. I turned to my wife, Sarah, who stood frozen near the elevators, holding our daughter Mia. The tears on Sarah's cheeks had dried into streaks of shock. Sarah, I said gently, my voice cracking with emotional exhaustion. In all my life, I have never turned my back on you or Mia. I swear on my life, I never touched her. Mia broke free from her mother's grip and ran toward me, wrapping her small arms around my waist. Dad, I knew it. I knew you didn't do it. I dropped to one knee, ignoring the agonizing pain in my ribs, and held my daughter tight. In my previous life, this sweet girl had died in a dark alley, beaten by a mob driven mad by Dora's lies. Holding her warm, living body against mine, I squeezed my eyes shut as tears finally spilled down my cheeks. Not this time, I swore internally. This time, every single one of them will pay. Within 2 hours, the dynamic in the city had turned completely upside down. The live stream had been watched by over 3 million people before it was abruptly cut off. The sight of an innocent professor presenting official state forensic proof of his vasectomy while exposing a corrupt hospital lab conspiracy live on air lit the internet on fire. The backlash was instantaneous and apocalyptic. By nightfall, Dr. Richard Vance had been arrested in his office trying to wipe the laboratory's digital audit logs. Police seized the blood samples and verified my claim within 48 hours. The fetal sample Dora provided was nothing more than a duplicate tube of my own blood that Vance had swapped in the lab. Dora Fox was detained for criminal defamation, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to commit extortion. I sat in my home living room, a thick bandage wrapped around my chest and ice packs on my bruised face. Sarah was sitting beside me, quietly applying medicine to my cuts, her eyes red from crying. Joseph, I'm so sorry, she whispered, her hands trembling as she dabbed, rubbing alcohol on my cheek. In the hospital, I slapped you. I believed them. For a second, I was so scared. I took her hand and pressed it against my face. Don't apologize, Sarah. Anyone would have doubted in that moment. The setup was designed to leave no room for doubt. But it's over now. They can't hurt us. Why would she do it? Sarah asked, her voice laced with horror and disgust. Why would a student go to such insane lengths to destroy a professor who only ever tried to teach her? I looked out the window at the city lights. In my last life, I thought Dora was just an evil individual, a sociopath looking for an easy way out of poverty. But during my months in prison back then, before I died, I had heard rumors. Dora hadn't acted alone. She was the weapon, but there was a hand holding the hilt. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. I opened it to find Dean Whitaker standing on my porch. He looked 20 years older than he had that morning. His tie was loose, his hair disheveled, and he was holding a bottle of expensive scotch and an official leather folder. Joseph. Professor Joyce, Whitaker stammered, attempting a weak, desperate smile. May I come in? No, I said flatly, standing in the doorway. Whitaker swallowed hard. Joseph, please. The university board held an emergency meeting an hour ago. The public outrage it's unprecedented. The board has fully exonerated you. We've issued a public apology on the university's official homepage. He held out the leather folder. This is the board's decision. Not only are you reinstated immediately with full back pay, but the department has approved your promotion to full professor, along with a $3 million research grant. For your lab, we need you to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the university's administrative oversight. I looked at the folder, then looked Whitaker dead in the eye. Administrative oversight? I laughed, a cold, breathless sound. You slapped me. In front of a live camera crew, Dean Whitaker. You told me to surrender my dignity, resign quietly, and take the blame for a crime I didn't commit, just to protect the school's reputation. You didn't care about the truth. You cared about convenience. Joseph, I was fooled too, Whitaker pleaded, his voice rising in panic.
Dora
Fox presented falsified documents. How was I supposed to know she forged blood tests with her uncle? You didn't care to know, I snapped. Because Dora Fox's benefactor is Vice Rector Vance, Dr. Richard Vance's older brother, and your supervisor on the university's real estate development board. Whitaker's breath hitched. His eyes widened in absolute terror. He hadn't expected me to know that connection. In my previous life, it took 2 years of prison talk for me to piece together that Vice Rector Vance, Dean Whitaker, and an offshore investment group were using female students to blackmail young, uncooperative faculty members, seizing their intellectual property and research patents while embezzling university development funds. Dora Fox wasn't just asking for $3,000 for an abortion. The $3,000 was the bait. Once I gave her the money, she would use the transfer record to force me to sign over my pending patent on high-efficiency semiconductor materials to Vice Rector Vance's shell company. In my last life, I signed the non-disclosure agreements in a desperate attempt to save my family, giving up my patent, only for them to destroy me anyway. You, Whitaker stammered, stepping back. How do you know about Vice Rector Vance? Tell the Vice Rector to prepare his lawyers, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I'm not signing your settlement. I'm going to tear your entire corrupt empire down to the bedrock. I slammed the door in his face. The following morning, I arrived at the City District Police Station because I was the primary victim in a high-profile criminal case involving extortion, evidence tampering, and public defamation. Detective Miller, the officer leading the investigation, had invited me to review the preliminary statements. Through the one-way glass of the interrogation room, I saw Dora Fox. She looked nothing like the polished, confident girl from my memories, nor the weeping victim from yesterday. Her hair was greasy, her makeup smeared, and her expensive designer clothes rumpled. She sat in the metal chair, hands handcuffed to the table, staring at the floor. She's refusing to talk without a private lawyer, Detective Miller said, handing me a cup of black coffee. Problem is, no top-tier defense firm in the city wants to touch her right now. Public sentiment is entirely against her. Her current public defender is telling her to plead guilty to reduce the sentence. She won't plead guilty easily, I said, taking a sip. She's still waiting for her backer to bail her out. Vice Rector Vance? Miller gave me a sharp look. We ran her phone records. Over the last 6 months, she made over 40 encrypted calls to a landline, registered to a holding company owned by Vice Rector Vance. But without direct financial records or a confession, Vance is claiming he was merely offering her financial aid as a disadvantaged student. I can give you the financial records, I said calm. Miller turned to me surprised. You have them? I know where they are hidden, I corrected. In my last life, after Dora became a millionaire influencer, she published a memoir detailing her triumph over adversity. In it, she arrogantly dropped cryptic details about her early financial holdings, bragging about an offshore account in the Cayman Islands registered under her younger brother's name, set up by a generous academic mentor. I wrote down an account number and a bank branch name on a piece of paper and handed it to Miller. Subpoena this account, I said. Look for transfers coming from Apex Capital, Vice Rector Vance's shell firm. You'll find 6 payments of $50,000 made over the last 8 months. The price for destroying 3 other young professors before me. Miller stared at the piece of paper, his eyes filled with shock. Professor Joyce, how on earth did you get this information? Let's just say I spent a long time studying my enemies, I replied softly.
May
I speak with her? Miller hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. I'll turn off the intercom recording, but I'll be standing right behind the glass. I walked into the interrogation room. The heavy metal door clicked shut behind
me.
Dora snapped her head up, expecting a lawyer or an officer. When she saw me, her face twisted into a mix of rage, humiliation, and deep-seated fear. You, she hissed, rattling her handcuffs against the table. You ruined me. You deliberate set up me. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down slowly, leaning back, looking at her with absolute indifference. I set up you? I smiled thin. Dora, all I did was refuse to give you $3,000, report your violation of school rules, and ask for a DNA test. You built the
lie.
You hired your uncle. You fabricated the screenshots. I simply let you walk into the light with your own trap. You're a monster, she screamed, her eyes bloodshot. You knew about your vasectomy all along. You intentionally let me bring the false test out in front of the cameras so you could destroy me in public. Yes, I admitted without a shred of hesitation. Dora froze, caught off guard by my blunt admission. In fact, I leaned forward, my voice dropping low, cold, and razor-sharp. I wanted you to hit the absolute peak of your arrogance before pulling the floor out from under you. I wanted the whole world to see who you really are. A fraud. A parasite. You think you've won? Dora sneered, trying to recover her bravado. Vice Rector Vance won't let me fall. He has connections in the high court.
As
Soon as this blows over, I'll be out and I'll. Vice Rector Vance isn't coming for you, Dora, I interrupted calmly. An hour ago, the State Anti-Corruption Bureau froze Apex Capital's bank accounts. They're executing a search warrant on his office right now. Dora's eyes dilated in horror. What did you say? Your Cayman Islands account. The one registered under your brother's name?
The
police are liquidating it as proceeds of criminal extortion. I continued, watching her spirit break piece by piece. And those 3 younger brothers you claimed to care so much about? The ones you said would sell you into marriage if you got expelled. I leaned back, resting my arms on the table. I had a private investigator check your hometown yesterday. Your parents didn't force you into anything. You sent them $10,000 last month to build a 3-story luxury villa in the village. You weren't a poor girl struggling for survival.
Dora.
You were a greedy extortionist using your background as a tragic prop to manipulate good people. Dora's breath came in fast, ragged hitches. The arrogant facade completely shattered. Tears of genuine, terrifying panic finally burst from her eyes. Professor Joyce, please. She suddenly dropped to her knees right there in the interrogation room, the iron handcuffs clanking loudly against the floor, a mirror image of the scene in my office. But this time, there was no audience, no sympathy, and no escape. I was wrong. I was manipulated by Vice Rector Vance. He forced me to do it.
He
promised me a graduate degree and $1 million if I took down your semiconductor patent. She sobbed hysterically, trying to reach across the floor to grab the hem of my pants, just like in her previous life. I pulled my leg back, stepping out of her reach. Professor, please save me, she wept, banging her head on the linoleum floor. I'm still young. I made a mistake. You're a teacher. Isn't a teacher supposed to give students a second chance? I stood over her, looking down at her pathetic, writhing form, remembering the icy day my daughter died in an alley, remembering the moment my wife jumped from our balcony, remembering her cruel, beautiful smile as the police dragged me away in my previous life. Professor, she had said back then, this world was never built to reward good hearts.
was it?
I leaned down and whispered her own words back into her ear. This world was never built to reward evil hearts, Dora. Enjoy your second chance behind bars. I turned around and walked out of the room, leaving her screaming and sobbing into the cold concrete floor. The fall of Vice Rector Vance and Dean Whitaker was swift, brutal, and thoroughly televised. Equipped with the financial paper trails, encrypted phone records, and testimonies from previous victims who came forward once Dora's network cracked, the district prosecutor's office filed a massive 60-count indictment against the university's corrupt administration ring. Vice Rector Vance was arrested at the international airport while attempting to board a private flight to Switzerland. His home was raided, revealing millions in foreign currency, illegal land deeds, and files containing extortion dossiers on over a dozen faculty members and prominent local businessmen. Dean Whitaker, realizing he faced up to 20 years in federal prison for embezzlement and grand fraud, suffered a massive panic attack during his preliminary hearing and was led away in handcuffs, his academic career and social standing destroyed forever.
Dr.
Richard Vance was stripped of his medical license permanently and sentenced to 7 years in a maximum security prison for evidence tampering, medical fraud, and perjury. As for Dora Fox, her trial became the trial of the decade. Despite her legal team's desperate attempts to play the poverty and youth card, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of her premeditated cruelty, secret audio recordings of her planning the fake pregnancy with her uncle, financial records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in illicit blackmail payoffs, and her cold-blooded strategy to destroy my family. The judge showed no mercy. Dora Fox was convicted of grand extortion, criminal defamation with catastrophic intent, and evidence tampering. She was sentenced to 12 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for the first 8 years. Her ill-gotten luxury assets were seized by the state to pay for court costs and civil damages. Her family's half-built villa in her hometown was foreclosed upon, and her greedy parents, exposed as accomplices in laundering her extortion money, were forced to pay back hundreds of thousands in fines, ending up deeper in poverty than they had ever been. On the day of her final sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse. The weather was bright and sunny, a stark contrast to the dreary, overcast skies of my past memory. Reporters surrounded me, shoving microphones into my face. Professor Joyce, with Vice Rector Vance and Dean Whitaker convicted, and Dora Fox sentenced to 12 years. How do you feel? Do you feel justice has been served for the academic community? I looked straight into the news cameras. Justice isn't just about punishing those who break the law, I said calmly. It's about showing the world that kindness is not weakness. Good people are soft-hearted because they choose to care, not because they are stupid. If you try to exploit that goodness, the consequences will be absolute. 6 months later, the morning sun filtered through the high glass windows of the university's grand auditorium. I stood behind the podium in a tailored black suit, looking out at an audience filled with hundreds of students, esteemed professors, and international researchers. Behind me hung a massive blue banner, National Semiconductor Innovation Summit, keynote address by Professor Joseph Joyce. After the scandal cleared, the university board had undergone a complete overhaul. The corrupt old guard was gone, replaced by dedicated educators. I was officially appointed as the head of the Department of Advanced Materials and Engineering. My semiconductor patent, finally freed from political interference, had secured over $20 million in state funding and international licensing deals. As the applause died down, I delivered my lecture on quantum semiconductor structures. My voice was firm, steady, and full of passion, the voice of a man who had reclaimed his life, his purpose, and his pride. When the lecture concluded, the auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. I stepped down from the stage, ignoring the line of admiring scholars and journalists waiting to shake my hand, and walked straight toward the second row of the VIP seating area. Sarah sat there, wearing a beautiful floral dress, her face radiant with pride. Beside her was Mia, wearing a cute little sweater, holding a large bouquet of fresh blue hydrangeas. Dad. Mia bounded out of her seat and threw her arms around my neck. You were amazing. You looked like a superhero up there. I laughed, lifting her up easily and hugging her close. Thank you, my little star. Sarah stepped up, taking my hand and leaning in to kiss my cheek. Congratulations, Professor Joyce. You did it. We did it, I corrected, holding her hand tightly. Together. As we walked out of the auditorium together, hand in hand, into the warm afternoon sunshine, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a legal notification from my attorney. It contained a short update from the State Women's Correctional Facility. Dora Fox's appeal for a reduced sentence has been formally rejected by the Supreme Court. She will serve her full 12-year term in maximum security. Her request to send a written letter of apology to you has been denied per your standing restraining order. I looked at the screen for a brief second, then turned off the display and slid the phone back into my pocket without saying a word. She no longer mattered. Her name, her greed, her cruelty, and the nightmare of my past life were nothing more than ash blown away by the wind. My daughter laughed, pointing up at a cloud shaped like an eagle, her joyful voice echoing in the crisp air. My wife smiled at me, her eyes shining with love and trust. I took a deep, clear breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and walked forward into the bright, unwritten future we deserved.